But this is the end of the hose that I just took off the fuel clock. Look at all that cracking. The other hose is the same. Both ends are kind of like that. Form a fuel line to the shape I want. Here is the desired shape. I made a little fixture that this fits in. I'm over bending it a little bit round here, and this is a 5/16 screen door spring. Actually found at Ace Hardware. A bit hard to come by. I did try it with the vinyl tubing. It bends, but it doesn't really hold the shape. I don't think any of these are really going to hold the shape, but I'm going to give this one a good go. So I've got it set in the jig. I'm going to give it some more heat in a minute. The old heat gun. See if we can't soften it up a bit more. One of the things I found with the heat gun is I have these pegs glued in. Yeah, it softens the glue. When I'm trying to wrap this Motion Pro for the easier tube of the two, haven't used a spring inside it, and as you can see it's kind of flattening out around this one. Not so bad around that one. It is flattening out. But I do have a spring I can put inside that will stop that. Some other good news is the spring clamps I have off the Suzuki fit this nicely. They'll go over, I'll let them go, and they'll spring on nicely. So I like the springs. It's much better for the rubber, and they'll just keep a constant force on it. So I'm using this piece of string here to measure the length of this piece. The new fuel hose is $30 for not very much, 2.5 feet I think they gave me. So I don't want to use too much, but I do need a little bit more than this. So I'm going to cut off a piece that's maybe 1 inch longer, just to give me enough to wrap around the mold. But that looks good. I'm adding about 1 inch. These are garden secateurs, shears. Does a very nice clean job of any type of hose cutting, even the braided stuff, cuts it nicely. That slid on the spring nicely, especially with a tiny bit of WD-40 down the inside. It just helps it go. And I'm really not worried about WD-40 because this is going to get fuel in. WD-40 actually burns, sorry. Get bending on my brain now. So I just want to make sure that I've got it around the bends, and notice how it does not collapse. Once you've got the spring inside, it doesn't collapse. And so this is the original tube. So I've got it overbent somewhat. Got a nice wedge in here to put another self-tapper in, and I'm using a shim here to protect the tubing against the threads because they're kind of sharp on the edges. So instead of just having this go directly against that thread, I've got a shim in there to protect it. Now I'm going to heat it. This material is meant to be thermoplastic, which is better than thermosetting. Because thermosetting, if you heat it up, it just becomes solid, kind of like Bakelite. But thermoplastic means it should bend, and I'll just take the stress out of it. I found this method gets me to about the same point as dunking it in boiling water for like 5 minutes. Right, let's see how we get on. Let it cool for about 10 minutes, cause it goes straight, but when we pull this out, it has taken a curve that's pretty good. And when I put it back in without these, so that it replicates this shape, I think that's pretty good. And it is quite flexible at this, and it's not compressing. It's not compressing this bend flat. Same at this end, if it goes flat like that. So that's very good. I like that. So here I'm comparing the amount of bend set I got in this one compared to this regular piece of hose, which I used in the same jig, same amount of heating. That's all I could get out of it, but this one's a lot better, and this one is of course very inflexible. This one is very flexible. Using the string measuring technique, best I can figure out is the initial starting length of this is about the same as the other tube. So I'm going to use that same and add about an inch just to make sure I get it out the ends. So I'm going to put the spring in the hose. This has already got that WD-40 on it from last time. As you can see, it slides through the hose very easily. Always a good sign. Let's see if we can wrap it around this maze. I'll start here. Bend it up. I'll come back and wedge it in a bit. Bend it over. And it has to go back down. So again, I need to get some serious wedging going on this one, and I've got to shield that one from that thread. A piece of hardboard in here again, got a wooden wedge in this bit, so I'm trying to replicate that. So it's overbent. Let's see what happens. Okay, I think it's cold enough for me to touch now. So let's take it out of the fixture, take it off the spring. Oh, it didn't take much of a set, did it? But the important thing is this bend is a little bit crushed, tiny bit. This one is probably good enough, and this one is probably good enough. We compare that to the original. This has a chance of working. Okay, I'm going to cut them to length and see if it'll fit on the bike. Here's how the tubes fit. Bearing in mind, Motion Pro says, yeah, do not do this. Have a valve here. Well, Suzuki couldn't be bothered to put a valve there. There's a parts bin bike, so they put hoses there, and then the fuel cot goes on separately. Where did I put that? Here it is. So the fuel cot goes on separately. So let's turn that to the off position. These go on like that. Yeah, it looks about right so far. And there it is. I'm just gonna put it on the bike, something like that. Let's go put it on the bike and see how it does fit. Alright, so this is where it fits on the bike. It doesn't look bad there, but when I bolt it up, the reserve one is getting a little crimped at the bottom. This bit's okay. The forward one looks absolutely fine. I think I'm going to shorten this hose just a little bit, and I think that will ease that crimp right there. So that's a tiny amount I chopped off, and as you can see, the bends fit very nicely. The front one looks great, and it looks almost like the formed one that Suzuki made. This is good. That's the reserve line at the back, the main line is on the front there. That's good. I'm going to call that success. So from unobtainable parts from Suzuki, they just don't make them anymore. The originals had cracked and were leaking. You can see around the edges they're all cracked as well, so that's stuff, yeah, done, toast. Cracked and leaking to success with Motion Pro's premium hose. Great, 5/16 hose.